Now let's, I'm going to create usually you're going to create a if you have multiple dashboards, you put them in subfolders. So I'm going to say, we've got let's see, I'm just going to call it dashboard. Now, this error here, source server error, I believe that's there because LoggerNet is closed. So CSI web server, those dashboards are getting their data from the LoggerNet binary cache that I discussed before. So if LoggerNet is closed, it's not going to be able to get the data from the cache. So we'll see if that error goes away once LoggerNet opens. And I've had LoggerNet closed for a while I was doing that troubleshooting. So I'm also going to open up the status monitor and show you how it just resumes catching up on the data that it didn't collect while LoggerNet was closed. Okay, you can see the error went away once CSI web server saw that LoggerNet was open again. And now LoggerNet is automatically connected to the data logger and getting caught up on the data collection that it missed while it was closed. All right, so I'll leave that open. And okay, so now we have this new site called Dashboard. And by default, it has, so the username and password for the root was admin, and then password was password. So when you create a new folder or a new site, I guess they call it a site, it automatically creates a anonymous username without a password that has read-only access. And then an admin user, which has, I think it's a password by default of admin. I'll leave it like that and we'll try that out. And with an access level of all. Okay. So when we upload our next dashboard, we're going to upload it to the dashboard site here. And we're going to use admin username, admin password. We'll see if that works. There's rules as to, there's hierarchical rules for the username and password. I forget what they are off the top of my head, but you can look that up in the documentation for CSI web server. So you can see that in the hierarchy, dashboard is under root, and there's only one layer of hierarchy that you can have. So, but you can look that up in the documentation. We'll see if admin user, admin password works. All right, so this is all running and ready to go. So back on the local PC, I am going to open up Rtmc Pro, and I'm going to find the dashboard that is running at data loggers, GU Tech. Okay. Okay, so we're going to upload this dashboard onto this new Azure VM. This one here that we're seeing is running on my VM. Okay, so we're going to open, and I'm going to try to find that file. Okay, so it's GUTech 02. All right, there it is. Now this is important. This dashboard file here, RTMC2 file, part of its configuration is you indicate where it should get its data from. So you can see that in the RTMC screen here, it's saying that it's not connected to LoggerNet. Okay. So it's looking for a data source it can't find. So to change that data source, now keep in mind what we're trying to do is instead of this dashboard getting its data from my instance of LoggerNet on my VM. We want it to get the data from your instance, okay? So if I go manage data sources, I'm going to say, okay, remote LoggerNet. And by that I mean remote, it's sitting on your VM, on this new VM we created, which is here. That's the address. Now this username is, I believe this is the username and password of the computer itself, of the virtual machine itself. It's definitely not the username and password for CSI web server, because we're looking for a data source, not a CSI web server. And actually, I'm realizing I may be wrong about this. Yeah, okay, so it's looking. Let me try something real quick. All right, this is the host name or TCP IP address of the computer running the communication server. Your username on the server. Oh, I think I know why. Okay, let's leave it like that. It's not connecting. But if we go over to the VM again, all right, so I got to check this here. So what's happening is that Rtmc Pro is trying to connect to a LoggerNet instance. And it's LoggerNet's default TCP port is 6789. And I believe the problem we're having here is that that port is blocked. Okay, so there's no incoming port rule. So I'm going to first set up this port rule in the VM portal. All right. So 6789 TCP. The name is going to be LoggerNet. It'll be interesting to see if this works on the first try. Okay, 6789. Now, it's still not going to work. So you see it's still X'd out here. If we were connected successfully, it wouldn't X out like that. I think the problem there is that we have to open that port up on the virtual machine also, on the Windows firewall. So if I go create a new rule, port 6789. Allow the connection. We'll call it LoggerNet. Okay, so that rule is now enabled. Okay, it's still not working. Trying to think what it could be. All right, I'm going to have to pause again and troubleshoot this, and I'll be back when I figure it out, hopefully. Okay, we're back here on the local PC. I discovered the issue. It's something I always forget to do, which is if we go over to the, we go back to the VM. All right. By default, LoggerNet does not allow remote connections to it. So in order to enable remote connections, you need to go I right-clicked on the interface here and said show main menu under Tools and Options. There's an option here to allow remote connections. Now this is something I think they've added to the standard version of LoggerNet that used to only be available to people that have a license for LoggerNet admin. And it enables you to add security so as you can see here, this will allow users running remote LoggerNet clients. So in this case, Rtmc Pro web publisher is acting as a remote LoggerNet client. So we weren't able to connect because LoggerNet was not allowing that remote connection. The request was getting all the way to LoggerNet, but LoggerNet was stopping the request. So beware, remote users could delete devices and destroy data. We recommend you enable security when allowing remote connections, which makes sense, right? If somebody just knew your domain name and your port that you're running on, which is 6789 by default, they could come in and really cause problems if you enable the remote connection. So what I'm going to do is, again, I'm going to, just so I can remember all these, so just admin, password. Obviously, you want to pick something more secure. So capital A, admin, and then password. You have enabled allow remote connections. The change will not take effect until you shut down and restart LoggerNet, which we'll go ahead and do. So as LoggerNet's restarting, you can see that CSI web server stays up and running, but now it's lost the source of its data. Okay, so it gives us that error. I don't know if LoggerNet is restarting by itself or just shutting down. It looks like it just shut down. So we'll go ahead and restart it manually. So as it's restarting, we should see this red indicator turn green, indicating that we have successfully connected to the remote LoggerNet. Okay, not yet. All right, LoggerNet is back up and running. So I'm going to double click on this. Okay, it's because we added that security. All right, so let's see. So admin and then password. Okay, there we go. All right, so that username and password, when you configure your data source, is not the username and password for the Windows virtual machine user. It's the username and password that you set up in the enabling the remote connections dialog in LoggerNet. All right, so, whoops. Okay, there we go. So we're connected here. All right. Now the last thing I want to show you is that this is a tricky thing you have to keep in mind, but all right, just a very quick introduction to Rtmc Pro. Just something that's important to appreciate before we do the upload here of the dashboard. So this number here and all these numbers that you see, these are all, like this one, for example, is I think they call it a label. It's a digital display item component. So if I right click it and go to properties, it's looking up a piece of data that's living in the LoggerNet data cache. And where it says GUTech GUT, that's the name of the station of the data logger on my server, on my instance of LoggerNet. And let me just to be very clear, if we go over to the setup screen again, we called it EcoHouse. Okay. So on this dashboard, this is looking for data in, so it's the remote LoggerNet data source. That's our LoggerNet server. Then it's looking at the GUT station or data logger. And then it's looking at the public table. And then grid_W is the field. Okay. So because we called our station here, we called it EcoHouse instead of GUT. We're not seeing any numbers pop up here. By the way, we're not seeing any numbers pop up here because this is not first of all, another reason we're not seeing numbers is that this is not a live view. If we want to look at live data coming in, we have to click on this live data button. All right. And we see this exclamation point everywhere, which means that it's not able to collect the data. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a find and replace. Every time in any of these components where it says GUT, we're going to replace it with EcoHouse. And I'm going to look throughout the entire project, okay, and replace it. So it made 123 replacements. And I'm not sure why this is still, so some of those, so you can see the chart here is working now. But this item, for example, still has the exclamation point. Remote LoggerNet. EcoHouse public grid W. So that should be working. Okay. It's because we have not enabled data collection from the public table. Okay. So the data cache where Rtmc Pro and the CSI web server get its data from, it needs that data to be available in the data cache. And if we go back into the setup screen, you can see that, and we're trying to get data from the public table. It's not being collected. It's not included in the scheduled collection. So we don't want to actually store the public table data in a file. We just want it to be collected and put in the data cache so that it's available to these clients. So we're going to include it for scheduled collection, but we're going to use an output option or a file output option of no output file. And it actually picked that as by default because you're not going to store data from the public table. That's a whole other story of the difference between the public table and the persistent data tables. But LoggerNet is anticipating that we do not want to store that data in a file, but we do want to collect it and we want it to be available in these clients. All right. So if I click apply, and then we go back to our dashboard here. Hopefully the next time I'm not sure how long it's going to take, but that data should be available from the public table. It might be the next time that it actually tries to collect data. There we go. So on that 20-second interval. All right, so this screen looks good. So it is 5:59 a.m. in Muscat on May 5th. The sun is not up yet, so the inverter is not producing any power. We don't have any exclamation points. All the data is being populated, hopefully on all these screens here. Yes, yes, yes. Looks good. Now at this point, the only thing I would do is we had this data source called Remote LoggerNet. Now, we were able to see the live data come up, even though we're on Rtmc Pro on our local PC, because we entered the server address. So we're accessing LoggerNet from outside. I don't know if this is true or not, but I usually like, so when we actually upload this dashboard to the CSI web server, then it's actually being hosted on the same computer as LoggerNet. So what I like to do is set up another data source, and it's called the server data source, and we'll call it local LoggerNet. And instead of that DNS name, it's now localhost because it's on the local computer. So admin, is this the one we called? I forget. I think we also called this one admin. Never a good idea to do this. Okay, so admin, password, remember username and password. Let me see if, yeah, password. Okay. So now that is X'd out because there is no instance of LoggerNet running on this localhost, which is the local PC. But once we upload this to the Azure VM, then there will be localhost available. Okay. Now, all these components are going to remote LoggerNet. Actually, so you know what? Instead of doing a find and replace for all this stuff, I'm just going to remove this. The only thing that has to be changed when you switch from remote to local is the server address. So I'm just going to say, call it LoggerNet, just to test that this is still working. Okay, the X went away and we see connected down here. So we are connected remotely. And now just before so the next step I'm going to take is to upload this dashboard to CSI web server on the VM. I'm going to switch it to localhost. We're going to lose our connection because we don't have LoggerNet running on this localhost. But it should work again once we upload and there is a LoggerNet on the localhost. All right, so I'm going to, this just popped up because it's recognizing that we're not connected. It keeps prompting me for that. I'm going to save this. Actually, it saved it already. I'm going to say publish, use the web publisher, and we're going to use our DNS name here. Okay, now we need now we're going to upload our dashboard to CSI web server. So now we need the user ID and password for the CSI web server website that we want to upload to. We're going to try to upload to dashboard, and we used admin and then admin username and then admin. We left it as admin for the password, which we think is the default. That's lowercase. I'm not sure it matters. So I'm going to enter admin here. Okay. This is probably an indication that in order to see these remote folders, we probably need to use the username and password for the root user. So up here, the root user. which was admin and then password. So let's see if that, oops. Password. Okay, now it worked. So we're able to see that now. The dashboard website, which is this one right here. So this username and password, so it looks like I usually just leave the same, have the same username and password throughout here, but I just wanted to test what happens if they're different. So it looks like when you're doing an upload from Rtmc Pro, you need to use the root username and password. The one that exists here for dashboard is to do things like once the dashboard's up and running, you may want to password protect that particular dashboard so that people can't come in and change numbers and turn controlled equipment on and off. So that's good to know. But to do this upload, we need to use the root username and password. Here's our project file that we just set up. Default poll interval. So this is how often you want the dashboard to update itself, to try to update itself. We'll just use these, leave these settings here and do publish website. And that's a good sign that the progress bar is moving across. So when it's done, it's going to ask me if I want to view the dashboard in the browser from the local PC. Okay. Hopefully these numbers appear. If they do, that indicates that it is successfully grabbing the data from the local LoggerNet server. Sometimes it takes a second or two. Okay, we're not having any luck yet. All right, let me think. So one thing we can see here that we are getting, we are seeing the dashboard. So it's being hosted on the web server here. And if we look in the HTML or the HTTP root folder, we're going to see in our dashboard site all these files it received from our web publish. So that part is working. The only thing that's not working is that we're not seeing the data. So something must have been wrong in the configuration. Well, I'm going to exit out of the web publisher and go back here. Localhost. Okay, I'm wondering if maybe, so that username and password that we set up, under allow remote connections, username and password, perhaps those are not needed if you're trying to access LoggerNet from a local connection, not a remote connection. And so I'm just going to upload it. I'm just going to get rid of the username and password and try it again. We'll see if we have more luck. So when I do this upload again, it's just going to overwrite everything. We'll close that out. Okay, we still don't have any numbers coming up here. So, just going to give it a few seconds. Okay, not working. Let me look again here. Remote LoggerNet. We changed the name. Okay, it's just LoggerNet now. I'm actually surprised it didn't. Okay, well, I'm going to go through. I'll do so remote LoggerNet. Change it to remote, just LoggerNet. Okay, let's just check. So LoggerNet. All right, we'll try again. And I'm going to leave I'm going to again assume that there's no username and password for a local instance of LoggerNet. We'll see about that. Okay, that worked. So that's what did it. All right. Let's just see if all these pages are here. I'm looking for exclamation points, which indicate a problem, as we've seen. Okay, everything's working. So just to review, it's important. Let me close out of here. It's important to make sure that the name of the data source that you're using in all your components here is actually a data source that you've defined. Usually, by the way, I think whenever I change the name, if we were to change this here, I'm just going to test it. Oops. So I'm going to rename it. Actually, okay, there we go. Source name. Okay. Change it to something else. I'm curious to see if that gets updated throughout the project. So see here, it automatically changed the name. I think the problem we had before is that we created remote LoggerNet and local LoggerNet, and we had one enabled. So that automatic change doesn't appear to happen unless you just have one data source defined. And this is the way I've always done it. I've just always had one data source, and then when I'm trying to test things on the local machine, I use the local machine that I'm running Rtmc Pro on. I use the remote server address. Okay, there it is. We're getting our data here. But right before, again, I've said this before a few times, but right before I upload to CSI web server, change it to localhost, and then it's able to, as you can see, once the dashboard is live on the remote on the Azure VM, localhost works fine because LoggerNet is on the same computer as CSI web server. All right, I'm going to close out of that. Just check one more time. Okay, we're up and running here. And you can see the site name here, GUT_V02. That came from, it's not dashboard. The site name itself, dashboard is just the part of the path, which is the folder. If we look again in our root directory, dashboard, okay, there's all the files. The site name itself is assigned when we use the CSI, what is it called? The web publisher. All right, so when I'm opening Rtmc Pro, it's going to just automatically open that file that we were just working on, which is the last one that we were using. Okay, so publish to web publisher, GUT version 02. That whatever we name it, that's what's the site is going to be called up here. So if I was going to change it to GU Tech Eco House, I'd have to republish. Guess I can go ahead and do that. Except I forget if I left localhost as the host name. Well, we'll see if it works. Okay, you can see the site name up here changed, GU Tech Eco House. And yes, that worked. Looks like the sun just came up 1 watt. Well, down to 0. Sun's probably coming up now.